When you start talking about the complicated subject of beef in a grocery store versus buying beef from a rancher directly, one of the most common questions I get is, why is it more expensive when you buy it from a ranch? Because you're cutting out a lot of the middlemen, so why doesn't that decrease the price? I'm Trinity Vandenacker, and welcome to Life in the West. So let's take hamburger for instance. Buying hamburger from a chain store like Walmart, the cheapest I could find was about $3.80 a pound, where if you buy it directly from a rancher who's butchered it, it's about $5 to $6 a pound minimum. So why this discrepancy? One of the first things we have to understand is marketing. When you're reading labels in a grocery store like Walmart, a lot of it will be labeled like grass-fed or all natural. These labels can really mislead the person buying it to think they're buying the same product that they are directly from a ranch. So here's what those labels actually mean. So first of all, grass-fed. That's getting to be an overused term, and it can apply to all across the board. It's on a lot of labeling now. Here's the problem with grass-fed. It doesn't mean that all its life that cow or animal was fed grass. What it means is you can apply that to anything that was on grass for some of its life. That's about 99% of the cattle raised in the United States are on grass for some period of time, usually quite a bit of their life. To make any money in ranching, you have to keep your feed costs down. The only way you do that is to not feed hay. The least amount of time you can feed hay, the more money you make. That means the longer you have them on grass, the more money you make. The next one would be all natural. All natural can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can mean, when you picture all natural, you picture running out on the prairie, and grazing like cattle do in Montana and all these western states. But it could mean just that it's actually meat and fat. So it's actually meat and fat, and they're not adding vegetables or something. But even if you added vegetables, couldn't you say that was all natural? So you have to read labels in a way that you're deciphering marketing from reality. And I think that's very important when determining the difference in price between in the store and on the ranch. To really grasp the reason why it's more expensive to purchase from a ranch than it is from a grocery store, we have to understand the process that the beef goes from the field to the store and from the field to your plate from the rancher. So the first process is to a grocery store. The calf starts out by being born on a ranch somewhere, either in the West or the South or the Midwest or Texas. It doesn't matter. They're born someplace, usually raised on grass until they're 6 to 8 months old. Then they're sold as a weanling to somebody who runs them on grass. They're called grass calves at that point, and they usually go to places like Nebraska, eastern Montana, places with wide open areas of grass, because they're pretty wild at that stage. So they're run from the age of 8 months or so till they're a year and a half. Then they're sold to somebody that goes to a feedlot. In a feedlot situation, there's huge, vast numbers of cattle that are taken into lots, and they're fed whatever the cheapest feed they can get, corn or grain or whatever. So they can buy vast amounts of feed, and that brings down their feed cost considerably at the very end. So that is called finishing. So they finish out this steer, typically, or heifer, depending on what they bought. And then it is taken to one of the slaughter plants in the United States. It's typically one of the ones that does like 4,000 head a day. All the plant costs, everything are distributed over a vast amount of cattle, which cheapens up the per pound. They take in cattle, boxed beef from outside the country, mix that with their meat, which cheapens it even more. And then with things like sausage and hamburger, they can mix in pelletized pink slime, what they call pink slime, or finely textured meat, which is now called ground beef by the USDA, which cheapens it up even more. Then they package it to whatever company wants to put their label on this. So any company can buy the beef from these companies, and they'll package it for them with their label and their brand. And it doesn't have to say, according to the rules of the United States right now, it does not have to say that it comes out from outside of the US. It doesn't have to label that it's mixed. It doesn't have to say any of that. It just says ground beef, all natural, grass-fed beef. Now, when you look at that process versus the process of the rancher takes his calf that he would sell at 8 months old and instead feeds it for a whole nother year till it's a year and 8 months old. And at that point, he has to finish it. So when you buy grass finished beef, that would mean they just leave them on grass or feed them grass hay until they're butchered. But if it's just grass fed and they want to finish them with grain or corn, they have to buy grain or corn or purchase grain or corn byproducts, which have a ton of benefits and create a lot of good marbling in the meat. And they're fed this finishing product until they're butchered. But to sell it to you, he can't go to one of these big plants. He has to go to a small plant because they don't accept outside cattle at these big plants. The problem is it can't be just any slaughterhouse or butcher shop. It has to be a USDA inspected plant. So he has to find one that has USDA inspection. Now, most of them went out of business years ago, but now they're getting them back in certain areas of Montana and the West. But it's going to be much more expensive for them to butcher 5 head of cattle or 10 head of cattle than it is for a company that is a $1 billion company and spreading that cost over 4,000 cattle. Butchering 15, 20 head a day, that is a lot more expensive per cow than it is over 4,000, if you understand me. Also, ranchers, when they sell you their beef off of their ranch, are not going to mix this off with something that from out of the country or mix it off with any kind of a product like pink slime. They're going to have just the meat of their cow. So you're getting more meat that's directly ground into burger instead of these byproducts or meat from Brazil or Paraguay. So you see the difference here. There is no way that a rancher that's raising it on his own property, finishing it, and then paying to have it butchered in a USDA inspected plant that only does somewhere between 10 and 200 cows a day. I don't even know one that does 200 cows a day. The cost is so drastically different to get it to you that you see that at the end result. So why would you buy from a ranch versus the grocery store? Well, I just named a few reasons because you're getting a much inferior product from the grocery store just by going through that process. You're adding in those products from other countries where we don't really know how it was handled. Also, in the process of bringing that beef in, they're now bringing a lot of it in boxed beef. So years ago, when they butcher an animal, they would hang it up and they call it dry aging. And dry aging, when it hangs for 10 to 15 days, it actually it's a natural process that keeps the microbials from forming on the beef. It's just the way it works. But if you butcher that animal overseas or here even, and you put it directly in a box, you cut it into large sections, put it in plastic and put it in a box, it is a perfect environment to grow microbials on that meat. So because of that, there's a lot more chemicals that are put on that meat to try to help that process. And the reason they do it is because it keeps it cheaper. It makes it cheaper to go directly from there to the box instead of taking the time to hang it and do dry aging. So when you get it from a rancher, it's almost always dry aged. That's the process that they go through. You can taste the difference. The quality is definitely different. So what you're paying for is a higher quality meat. But is that the only reason you should do this? Walmart has a product coming out because they understand that people are wanting to know where their meat comes from, and they want it to come from a ranch. They want that organic, good quality meat that they're not getting directly from the rancher. So they're coming out with a product, or at least they're talking about it, which is something ranch beef. I can't remember the name of it. But it's from two ranches, two very, very vastly large ranches that they're going to get their meat from. This helps in a way because you might get a better product. But one thing it doesn't help is the small family rancher. At some point in our history, we've become against the family rancher. And, we don't want him having cattle on public ground. We don't want him, making a living off the land. He owns too much property. It's just not fair, right? And this is a huge mistake for our future because family ranchers, just by doing what they do, they keep land available for wildlife. They keep land from being developed. When a family ranch goes out of business, a lot of times they sell it to the highest bidder when they sell their land. Selling your land to the highest bidder is what you're going to do when you're trying to sell your land and retire because your kids won't go there. Now, we'll go into the reasons why kids aren't going there in future episodes, but right now I want to focus on the fact that when you keep these family ranchers in business, you're actually helping the environment. People think that cows are a problem for carbon, and actually they're a carbon sink, meaning they take carbon out. When you put them, the Smithsonian has done studies now, when you have buffalo or cattle on grassland, it creates the right environment for all of the birds, your elk, your deer. When you don't have them on there, in several years, you actually start losing your bird life. Your elk don't like it because these bigger animals they stomp everything in the dirt. It's like, think of your lawn, what you do for your lawn. You water it, you fertilize it, and you aerate it. Well, that's what those large animals do for grasslands, mountain areas, anywhere that grows grass. And it creates new green shoots. It creates environment for other species to utilize. And they've discovered that these other species won't use it if those large animals are completely removed from that environment. All of those reasons being, when you're buying beef directly from a rancher, yes, it is more expensive, and you do get what you pay for. And some people aren't going to be able to afford to do that. But you're also helping save land for our future, for the future of your children and my children. Because when you have public land surrounded by private land, you are essentially keeping that entire area available for wildlife and species of all types that can then move from public to private land. When you get rid of the private land because nobody can make any money and everybody doesn't like them, what you end up with is these limited areas where the wildlife can't move like they used to. They are inhibited. They don't have as much habitat. So all of this for our future goes into where you buy your beef. You can buy cheap beef, and I'm not going to look down on you for it because the economy isn't what it used to be, right? But I want you to know the truth of why beef is more expensive buying it directly from a rancher than when you buy it in the grocery store. This is Trinity Vandenaker. Until next time, God bless.